Hello and welcome back. My name is Dr. Christopher Gennari, and this is Great Big History Podcast. In this episode, we start part 2 of our class. We start with ancient Greece. And we always start with geography, and so we start, if you're on the video, with a satellite shot of the Aegean world, of what was the Greek world, the modern state of Greece, the western coast of Asia Minor, what is today Turkey, the Black Sea, Albania. And the thing about Greek geography is it had 2 components. This is the first one we're talking about that doesn't have a river. And so without a giant river, what do they have? Well, they have 2 components, and the first is the mountains. Greece is a mountainous area. It's our first real mountainous area we've talked about. We did a little bit on the Hittites, but the Hittites lived on the in the mountains, but also on the Great Plateau that is central Asia Minor. The mountains have the effect of poverty. That's the big thing for the Greeks. 90% or so of the land is useless for farming. It's all mountain. And so it's very hard to farm. Farming is 98% of the economy. And so this is our first real poor people. The Hebrews were a poor people in the context of the Middle East, but they were a good medium-sized people. There were people poorer than the Hebrews out there in the Middle East. They're a good medium-sized civilization. They weren't Babylon, they weren't Egypt, but they weren't the smallest of people either. And that's one reason why they get involved in so many wars and things turn out bad for them, because they were too big to be ignored and too small to be powerful. The Greeks, on the other hand, are poor in terms of Babylon, Persia, Egypt. They're broken up because the mountains isolate communities. People are going to live in the valley between the 2 mountains. Well, going up and down the mountain is a pain in the butt. And so what happens is isolation. The people on one side of the mountain live one way, and the people on the other side of the mountain do their own thing. The result of that is autonomia, a Greek term from autonomia, which we get autonomy from, self-rule. The idea is you make your own rules about yourself. That's the idea. And that is incredibly important to the Greeks. That is their number one value. The idea that the people over that mountain don't tell me what to do. We decide for ourselves how we want to live. The second thing this isolation creates, because the mountains create poverty, they also create isolation. So the isolation creates autonomia. The second thing that isolation creates is the polis, is the city, as the central part of identity. Because you are separated from everybody else. So all the people you knew were inside that polis. It's where we get politics, polity. And so Greek identity is not Greek. The Greeks do not identify themselves as Greeks until they meet other people. Instead, they're Athenians, they're Spartans, they're Thebans, they're Corinthians. That's the idea. And so you get cities, you get an urban population. And this is our first, other than Babylon, our first urban people. These are people who want to live in cities. Even their farms are outside the city. They go to their farm and then they live in the city. And so the concept of civilization, the very act of being civilized, the definition of civilization is to be one who lives in a city and one who makes their own rules, who participates in government. But since they're poor, people need to buy food. They don't make enough food to support themselves. So they live in these cities because there's not a lot of space, which means they have to trade. They have to make something that's not food and sell it somewhere else for money that they then can buy food with. And so, but the mountains means you can't trade very easily. So what do? Well, that's because there's the sea. That's our second aspect. So we have the mountains and the sea. Those are our two aspects. And the sea allows for connection. The mountains separate people, but the sea connects them. It connects them to the Mediterranean Sea. It connects them to the rest of the Greek world. It was easier to go and trade with other Greeks by sea than by land. And so what this allows is connection and colonization. You're able to connect to other Greek cities. And you're able to colonize places outside of Greece. You're able to leave. Because remember, you're hemmed in by those mountains. A city can only grow so large. And so what people do is they get on boats and go somewhere else. This is Magna Graecia. M-A-G-N-A. Graecia. G-R-A-E-C-I-A. This is the concept of Greater Greece. But that's Greater Greece. Magna Graecia is Sicily and southern Italy. So if you're Nepalese or Sicilian, you were Greek long before you were Italian. It's the Romans who will make you Italian. So if you were in Western Greece, you would go to Sicily or southern Italy, which makes sense. It's close. It's dangerous to sail, but it's the closest place to go. If you're Athenian or northern and eastern Greek, you go to the Black Sea, the Crimea, the coast of Asia Minor. Because the islands, which are all over the Aegean, because those are close. And so that allows for better farming, which allows for more money. The Sicilian farms, Sicily is way flatter than Greece, so it allows you to own a bigger chunk of property, to be more independent, to be more traditional. So Sicily is one of the great rich places in the Mediterranean world. It's going to be so wealthy, the Romans and the Carthaginians are going to have at least two major wars over who controls it. So you get better farming, which allows for more money. So colonization and connection by the Mediterranean Sea. So the mountains equal poverty, but the sea equals money. Because the sea equals connection and colonization. Allows you to leave. The other thing the sea allows for is connection to those older civilizations that we've talked about. Egypt, Persia, the Lydians. And that allows for trade. The Egyptians have lots of food, but also knowledge. The Persians, the Lydians, will have all of that Mesopotamian culture and knowledge. So you get Egyptian gods that come to Egypt. You get Lydian coins. The Lydians invent coinage, and the Greeks go, that's great, we're going to use that. So you get this connection to older civilizations that allows for trade and for knowledge. And so if you're on our video, I'm going to show you two maps that show just how big the Greek world expands. There's not a lot of Greeks. There's maybe 2 million in the time of this chapter. There's not that many of them. But they're spread all over the Mediterranean. If the sea touches the land, there are either Greeks or Phoenicians, one or the other. The Phoenicians are the people who are now of Lebanon. But those are the other great traders, and they're in Africa and Spain, parts of northern Italy. They're also a trading-based people, because Phoenicia does not have a lot of land. It's hemmed in. Cana to the south, Syria to the north, Babylon to the northeast, Egypt to the southwest. So, like the Hebrews, the Phoenicians are kind of hemmed in by geography as well, and politics. So, what we have is this wider world, the Black Sea, the coast of Asia Minor, the coast of Libya, Italy and Sicily, a part of southern France, a part of eastern Spain. And if we take a look at southern Italy and Sicily, Magna Graecia, you see that all the cities are on the coast. There's very few inland, because if you're inland, you can only trade to the 1 or 2 cities that you build a road to connect to. But if you're on the coast, you could trade to anybody who has a port, which is basically everybody of the Greek world. And so all of the cities of the Greek world, if possible, and all the important ones, are all going to be more or less port cities. Now, Athens is a weird exception. It's not a port city, but it will build a port, and then it will build a road to that port, and then it will build walls to protect that road to that port. So Athens will kind of make itself into a port city. All right, in our next chapter, we're going to do legitimacy and government. How does geography affect ancient Greek legitimacy and government? Thank you.